Ready to roll, Madam Clerk? Yep. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. It's actually 9:01. My apologies. We'll welcome everyone to our meeting this morning of April 30th. Call the meeting to order. Martin is going to read the land acknowledgement for us this morning. Please, Martin.
Yep. Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. As we gather, you can't hear me, can you?
We can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay. As we gather, we recognize and acknowledge the traditional keepers of this land with whom we share today. The Township of Southgate is part of the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Six Nations of the Grand River, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and Saugeen Métis. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are as it reflects our histories. May we live in peace and friendship with all its diverse people.
Thank you, Martin. Madam Clerk, is anyone registered for open forum?
No, none today, Mayor Milne, unless Justin wanted to speak. I don't think so, though.
Okay, thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. Someone confirm the agenda, Joan and Barb. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest related to any item on today's agenda? Not seeing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, you can declare it at that time. We have no delegations or presentations. Adoption of the minutes from April 17th council and closed session meetings. Someone care to move that, please? Jason and Joan, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Reports to municipal officers. Clerk Lindsay Green has the first report for us this morning. It's regarding approval of fireworks bylaw 2024-040. Someone move that, please. Monica, thank you. And Barb. Morning, Madam Clerk.
Morning, through you, Mayor Milne. Staff did quite a thorough review of our fireworks bylaw. There was quite a few inconsistencies in the last version, and it was quite honestly pretty confusing. So we did start fresh. That's why there's not a track changes document included. So this one's a lot simpler. It's a lot clearer for people to follow. It's pretty simple, to be honest. You're only allowed to use consumer fireworks or display fireworks, Victoria Day and Canada Day, and the one day preceding and the one day after only. But if groups or people want to go through an exemption process with council, then that's part of the bylaw that's built in there. So those are the only 2 days that are allowed through the bylaw, but there is an exemption process if people want to hold other events.
Very good. Thank you. So in other words, you blew up the old one.
Pretty much. It needed blown up.
Martin's laughing.
Tough crowd, tell you. Okay, questions, Barb.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Milne, and thank you, Lindsay, for all of the work that went into this bylaw. It is definitely a lot clearer. I did want to just, and I appreciate you clarifying for me, and maybe it's important to clarify for anyone who might listen or ask in the future. Victoria Day and Canada Day are set by the federal government, right? Those are the 2 days that are recognized for fireworks federally.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And consumer fireworks would be the kind of fireworks that, my dad would have purchased at the local store and put up in our backyard.
Yeah.
They don't go very far, and you don't need a permit for those.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Monica.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just through you, Chair, to the clerk, just with regards to the exemption process, would there be further details available that you could provide now that would help to explain what the criteria will be used to do the consideration for exemptions? And when we're looking at exemptions, just if you could touch on generally for bylaws that are in place, if someone did have a request for an exemption, would it kind of be like a similar process?
Sure. So I guess I'll compare it similar to the noise bylaw. So staff receive a request for an exemption, and then that request is brought through staff report to council for their consideration. Usually noise bylaw is for events and that sort of thing, which we assume would be the same for fireworks. So we'd have details of the event, times, dates, that sort of thing, and then that would be brought to council for consideration. That would be through either the fire chief or myself. I would imagine that we'd bring that through to council, and then it would be up to council's discretion to grant an exemption or to not.
Just a quick follow-up, Chair. Just to that point, and thank you, that's perfect. When you mentioned the fire chief, so I guess whatever the respective request is for a bylaw exemption would go to the respected role of whoever.
Yeah,
handles- okay.
I'll be sending them to the
All
fire
fire
chief. He's online too, if there's any direct questions for him.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Lindsay, for your report. I'm really happy about it because I live in the new subdivision and I've had lots of issues with firework going on past midnight and just going on anytime there's a celebration that anybody thinks that they need to do fireworks. So I'm very happy that this is clear and this is concise, and I hope people will stick to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Any other discussion or questions? Jason?
It's not really a question, I guess more of a comment. I get what we're trying to do, but to me, it kind of, to country properties, it kind of, if somebody's having a family celebration or something, I get what we're trying to do, but I wonder if we could limit it more to the settlement areas. I don't know, like somebody that's out in the country a mile from anybody else. Just seems a little overkill that way to me, but whatever.
Well, I suppose I could just add a couple comments. I know some dogs are very susceptible to fireworks or lightning for that, or thunder for that matter. My son has 2 guard dogs for his guardian dogs for his sheep, and any kind of thunder or things like that just scare the bejesus out of them, and they sometimes get out. But for a large family event, I appreciate the exemption process, and there's no cost to the exemption process. So I think it'll work fine. Just my thoughts. Barb?
Thank you. That was one of my comments. But to that point, then, there is an exemption process. I noticed that there are applications that were included in the bylaw. Would one of those was it a permit application that they would use to apply for the exemption, or is there a separate form that they would request so that then it would go to the right parties? And part 2 is when there is an exemption, if my recollection is that it has to be advertised by the expense of the individual asking for the exemption in the paper, or is there notification to neighbors so that you would be informed that there's going to be a celebration at a wedding, they're going to set off fireworks, keep your dogs in.
Through you, Mayor Milne. No, we didn't build in like a notification process. This would just be same as noise bylaw. Like it would just be for council's consideration, and they either approve it or deny. So it would go publicly through the council process. But as far as further notification to neighbors, no, there wouldn't be built in through this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Next is the bylaw regarding the actual bylaw regarding the fireworks. Someone care to move that, please? Joan, thank you. Seconder? Martin, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, next one is another report from the clerk regarding Source Protection Committee appointment endorsement. Someone care to move that, please? Monica, thank you. And Joan. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Milne. This is our source water protection. I just lost the word. Committee appointment person, John Furin. He's been on the committee for quite some time. So he is our representative for the grouping, which includes us, Wellington North, Minto, Hanover, Brockton, and Aaron Eldersley. So John is quite willing to represent us again. He has quite an extensive career and quite a lot of background in this. So I think he's the guy for the job for sure. So All the clerks and CAOs are bringing John forward to their councils for consideration, and then we would do a joint letter to Source Water Protection. So just
Very-
looking for council's support for John.
Very good. Any questions, discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Planning Department, first report there is regarding renewable energy projects in the township of Southgate. Someone care to move that, please? Joan, thank you. Seconder? Monica, thank you. Bill, or Victoria, who's, welcome. Good morning. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mayor Milne, members of council. This report is requested by resolution of council and is a follow-up to a number of meetings that seem to have been cropping up recently regarding potential energy projects in Southgate. The report has a little bit of background about the Ontario Independent Electricity System Operator, the IESO, and the request for proposal that's currently out for solar, wind, hydroelectric projects, and bioenergy. There's also some information primarily emerging out of the county regarding battery energy storage systems. So there's the two streams of projects that we're reporting on today. As I had mentioned, we had started to have meetings in the last few months with various providers. And frankly, those meetings were a little light on information from them, even as far as what the approval process would be, were they to bring forward a renewable energy project or another battery energy storage system, which you've had a couple of those through your term of this council. As far as background, we go into a little bit about the way things used to be, which was kind of an unsettling period of time when there was all kinds of support and initiatives for commercial wind projects, and municipalities who weren't quite sure about what the impacts of these kinds of projects may be. A lot of debate, and eventually municipalities like Southgate passed what were called not willing host resolutions. That basically kept the commercial wind turbine projects away under the Green Energy Act. Eventually, those rules were reduced and limited, and in and around 2019, it became apparent that Planning Act provisions, official plan policies, zoning bylaw amendments, and such were going to apply to these projects as the IESO started to lay out new requests for proposals and new initiatives. We went back with staff to try and identify the investment in renewable energy projects in Southgate, and it's actually quite sizable. The one project that I identified on County Road 109, actually watched that one being built driving through over the years. It's quite a bit larger than even I've reported in that. And I thank the deputy mayor for pointing out we all learned a lot about what's in Southgate right now as far as solar. That project is actually not 75 acres, it's 328 acres. And also not far away from that on Southgate Road 22 is another 290 acres of solar farms laid out over two properties. So as far as supporting solar initiatives or green energy initiatives, renewable energy initiatives, and solar, there's some 620 plus acres not even identified in the report that we prepared. So it's quite sizable. There's also a number of wind turbines that I was able to identify in the report, but there's even more than that. The Public Works manager identified a solar farm done by a company in the Southgate Melanchthon town line area where there had actually been a failure and a road closure in order to remediate some issues that were occurring there. So it's a sizable interest and investment. And certainly this council and other councils have been supportive of the green energy initiatives that are in the township official plan and in the county climate change action plan. There was also the the battery energy support systems that you dealt with just before I came online here, or in the process of coming online. And they were seeking the municipal support resolution and were unsuccessful in that. It's interesting that the municipal support resolution seems to still be within the new procurement process by the IESO, but you can make it conditional. And I guess the main message coming out of this report is that despite all that's happened, good and bad, as far as these projects over the years, it appears now that council and through recommendations of staff have complete control over where these projects may or may not be permitted. I'll get into that a little bit more later on in the report. Clearly, provincial policy, county official plan, all support renewable energy projects. The county and the township official plan, the support for renewable energy projects is more at a local level in order to supply energy, to improve air quality, contribute to energy conservation and such. In terms of our zoning bylaw, this is one area that I think it would be worth correcting and making more clear. Section 5.19 won't go into a great deal of detail on it, but it lists all sorts of utilities that may be under the jurisdiction of various levels of government as being permitted basically in anywhere in any zone. And you'll see in the report later on that we're recommending that we initiate an amendment to that section to make it clear that certain renewable energy storage systems and renewable energy projects and battery storage systems not be exempt as utilities and allowed everywhere. I think that's just a good, I think that puts the control back to council and staff and makes the bylaw clearer. I can recall years ago always being worried about that. These utility sections in zoning bylaws are pretty common, and it could allow a lot of things in a lot of areas where maybe council might not want them. In terms of the current LT2 RFP, the IESO's process, there's lots of short forms, by the way. There is also a renewable energy approval that is required for these projects. So the wind and solar and so forth, in addition to going through whatever municipal process may be there, there is a provincial process that involves at least one public meeting and consultation with the community, First Nations, and so forth. And there is a municipal support resolution that appears to still be a requirement, but that can be conditional upon any rezoning, official plan amendment, site plan approval, whatever planning act change council may deem to be appropriate. Just a little word about setbacks. This has been very controversial. The older standards of the province, when I say older, 10 years or more, talk about 550-meter setbacks. Some wind opponents talk about 2-kilometer setbacks. It's not a set science, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it. Thought about the issue of what setbacks we might put in the Southgate bylaws. At this point, our report does not recommend one because it really sort of depends on the site-specific location and the studies that may or may not need to be done. But I just again wanted to assure council that I'm quite comfortable in discussion with the county and others that you have full control over where they may go through the current Planning Act approvals that you already do for all sorts of other projects. There's a little bit of information about what the city of Ottawa did. Some municipalities are being proactive, like council has asked staff to be in this case here. I'm not entirely sure what the status of your willing host resolution, not a willing host resolution is, except that if you did have a Planning Act application that came forward and it was deemed complete, I'm not sure you could avoid processing that application. And if you didn't process it, I suppose that part may be brought into question by legal counsel for proponents. So I'm not sure whether council, if they wanted to even deal with the not a willing host resolution. I don't have a recommendation on that at this point. It's something we can talk about. But since you have control under the Planning Act, and I would say complete control in the sense that even if you didn't approve a project, you felt it was not appropriate, and the proponents had done all the necessary studies and still had not convinced you it was right, they cannot appeal. There's specific sections of the Planning Act that have been put in that prevent them from appealing your decision. And we've confirmed that with the county, and that's our position, that even if you did turn one down through the entire Planning Act process, that's not subject to an appeal. So when I say it appears you have complete control, it's a pretty solid control over whether these projects go in. I just mentioned about the renewable, or about what the township's official plan currently says. In terms of what we're recommending as far as moving forward, there is a draft official plan policy and a draft zoning bylaw amendment in the on the end of the report. It's fairly straightforward. The official plan just adds a section about how we might process renewable energy approvals and battery energy storage systems and so forth. And it lists in part A that there's a bunch of designations where they're not allowed. I suppose it could say the opposite, in that the only area that would not need an official plan amendment for a renewable energy project would be a rural designation. So the rural designation, if a wind proponent or solar proponent wanted to develop that, they would need to stay out of the prime agricultural areas, some of the significant wetlands and hazards and so forth. So only rural would be where you might consider them. It also goes on to say that energy storage and renewable energy projects are going to be defined in the zoning bylaw, but they would only be considered through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. And that, of course, requires a complete application that comes in, all the appropriate technical studies that we've listed there, and any others that we may deem needed. And that finally, as a policy, council may decide require setbacks and location criteria that exceeds what are out there as minimum standards, and that would be where you think they're warranted. So it just is a statement about how, by policy, what might happen should one of these come forward. And when these providers want to meet with staff, we'll be supplying this section to them if you choose to approve it. And that'll give them some direction on where they need to go. In terms of specific rules in the zoning bylaw, there's two definitions that we're recommending. One is the energy storage system definition. I mean, we're all pretty familiar with what that might be if you happen to have a solar panel or whatever, or even if you have an electric car, you have a energy storage system of some form that retains the power that may be generated through charging your car or from the solar panel and so forth. And then there's a definition of renewable energy facilities, what they are. And then finally, the last correction or or initiative that we're recommending to council at this time is that section 5.19, that's that section that permits all kinds of utilities in all sorts of areas without amendment to the bylaw. We're saying here that no renewable energy facility or an energy storage system that's defined would be permitted except on a single property for an individual private user. So if you had your own solar panel, you could have a battery energy solar system with that panel or with that supply. That change to that section and the change to the policy basically would put all these renewable energy providers on the same playing field. Finding a site, if it's a rural designation, then they would need to apply for a zoning bylaw amendment, and with that submit all the necessary studies that might be needed in order to justify their application, and that would be subject to a public meeting and processed by council in the normal fashion. And you would have to consider those acting reasonably as to whether you would want to approve or not approve them. And that decision that you may make is not appealable. Of course, they would, in the terms of the battery energy storage system, there does not appear to be a renewable energy permit needed from the province. The county is looking into that further, but they would need a renewable energy approval for any solar, wind, hydroelectric, or other kind of renewable energy project. So I apologize for the length of that presentation. I appreciate council wanting to take the initiative. We're recommending some policy changes that would help, and some zoning changes that would help prepare you for what will inevitably be new applications coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and no need to apologize. It's a big, it's a large issue. There's a lot of moving parts in it, so no need to apologize for the length of the report. Appreciate the clarity. Are there any questions or discussion from council? Barb.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Milne, and thank you, Bill, for responding so quickly. I'm glad that we could work together on clarifying some things, for me anyway. The rural designation, I was speaking with the mayor and trying to understand what's the difference between rural designation and a prime agricultural property? And is it size? Is it ability? Is it that a rural designation is a mixed use? Could you explain that? I do have a couple of clarifying questions, just but I'll go one at a time with your permission.
Yep, that's fine.
I guess it's not an exact science, certainly, and Southlake doesn't have what's called a prime agricultural designation. I kind of mischaracterized it a little bit, and it is an agricultural designation. It appears to me to reflect the locations in the township that have what would be considered the largest contiguous farm systems with the best soil conditions. I wasn't part of obviously preparing the maps, but generally the class 1, 2, and 3 ag lands are usually put in the prime ag or in the agricultural designation. The rural areas, those policies are a little more permissive for development. They allow certain lot creations, as council's seen over the years, smaller parcels, and a little more broader permitted uses in them. So council doesn't need to permit them by policy in the rural designation if they don't want to. I guess I was just thinking that rather than requiring everything to have an official plan amendment, if they could find a site there, they could, if there were going to be a location that would be appropriate, it would be where it would not interrupt prime ag lands and where you want to have more of a contiguous agricultural system supported. So I guess I see the difference in that fashion, that rural allows a little more permissive uses. It could actually allow housing as well. But in terms of trying to find a site in a rural designation for a renewable energy project, it might be the one designation where you might give a general direction to. They would still need a zoning amendment anyway.
Thank you. And Mayor Milne was very good at explaining it and was part of, the mapping of all of that back in the day, I'm sure. So thank you for explaining that. I guess when you look at 618 acres, that wasn't necessarily continuous properties. They were multiple properties that were part of the project. So that explains that. With regard to private use, when you speak about private landowners, is that for their own personal use, or because there's a number of solar projects within the township and elsewhere that are part of a renewable energy lease, and they feed into the grid as opposed to serving their own farm. So are you suggesting that the private use, we don't want to interfere with someone who wants to put solar panels on their barn and use, or a turbine, and use that energy for their own personal use? Can you explain the difference and what control we would have over those, if any?
Right. The only place where it would come into effect is that section 5.19C. And if you look at the very last line on there, it says energy facility or storage system on a single property for an individual private user. So that was to cover my solar panels I want to put on the garage, or individual farm wind turbine that I use on my property for, providing power to my house or my barn or wherever I'm doing it. So that's the difference. The ones that, in my view, are connected to the grid would be, I think, treated differently and would be subject to, I think, a zoning amendment requirement. Now, if there's something already there, obviously it's in existence and it was put in legally, whatever process it may have gone through, then this amendment would not affect that. This would be others that come forward in the future. So yeah, we're looking at not being as regulatory on individual property owners on a single property that are using renewable energy to power some sort of system on site, and they're not connected into the grid. I always found that strange years ago that you could put up solar panels all over the place, but it had to go into the grid. You couldn't even use it on the property that you were putting them up on, which was a strange quirk in the system back then, but it may have changed now. But we're not trying to crack down or prohibit people who want to do their own project on their own property.
Thank you. If I may?
Yeah.
Thank you. And you mentioned the setbacks that we don't require, we don't place a minimum setback. Is that troublesome if we were to get a zoning amendment application and we want to impose a 2-kilometer setback? Could that pose a problem because we don't specify a minimum? Or that is at our discretion at site plan control?
Right. That's why we're recommending the policy part in part D of the official plan, new section 3.9. It says, if you believe, council believes that a larger setback is warranted, then you could require them to exceed the 550 meter standard that appears to be in place for the province in their older technical guidelines. I didn't feel, I wasn't sure that I could recommend a setback for you at this point in time because I don't have any information on a particular site. And as I mentioned in the report, it kind of varies between 550 that the province has set. There's some that talk about the blade distance times whatever. And then there's the 2-kilometer one that comes from certain advocates that aren't particularly supportive of, say, wind projects. So I didn't feel comfortable recommending any kind of setback other than giving the council the policy support to require a larger one if, when you looked at the site and you had the technical studies, you felt that that was warranted.
Thank you. One.
Yep.
So I'm supportive of your draft policy. I'm wondering, I mean, as long as, if we're going to allow them in the official plan in rural, they still have to come for a zoning amendment. I find the wording, as you know, I asked the question, well, if not in these areas, then where? And you did touch on that, and I'm wondering if we should be specific, but I will leave the floor. Thank you very much for council's indulgence.
Thank you, Barb. Any other questions? Monica?
Thank you, Chair. So there was lots of information here. So just through you, Chair, to Bill, I do appreciate the proactive steps that are being taken to clarify and streamline the application process for renewable energy projects. And I do understand the need for restrictions in certain zones. So you did touch on that clarity of zones. Just understanding which specific zones will renewable energy facilities be prohibited from, and what are the reasons for those restrictions, which the deputy mayor has touched on, you've touched on. And I feel that there's still going to be more questions in the future for that. One of the questions I did have was, in other municipalities, has this become regulatory? And because there is an understanding, I feel, out there that less government is better and more empowerment for people to manage their own properties. So I just wanted to understand if this has actually become regulatory in other municipalities from your history in understanding the subject matter.
Through the mayor to the councillor, thank you for the question. I was appreciative of council's resolution on this to look into it further. I would say that most municipalities generally just deal with applications as they come forward. And what it did is caused us to work with the county and others to just find out what this is going to look like. So I'm comfortable with the amount of regulation that we're putting forward. I don't think we're going to involve people who want to do their own thing on their own property, as long as they're doing it just for their own purposes. I was not able to find a lot of examples of other municipalities other than Ottawa and maybe one or two others that had been proactive like this. So I'm comfortable, though, that it's not overly regulated. And I think you're setting first of all, you have a very good track record with allowing not just solar, but some wind projects. And so you're maintaining the policies of your official plan, which already encourage renewable energy, and also the county's climate action plan. So I think you've been supportive of that. The investment is fairly sizable. And so I think this allows that to continue. If you do want to allow them, I don't think it's an overly regulatory process that would be put in place.
Okay, thank you. Martin and then Joan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Bill, I'm glad I've been listening to the discussion and about people on private property doing their own thing, being off the grid or being on the grid and just using it for barns or my own house or anybody's house. I've never been against green energy. I was part of a group years ago, and I was only against that because of the way the businesses were done, the way the legislation came down, the business ethos of the companies coming in, splitting up communities, all that kind of stuff. Just being underhanded in the way to get what they wanted. And I don't mind saying that. And it broke the camel's back when the one company through the World Trade Organization said we're going to sue Ontario. And you just don't want to work with partners like that. With that being said, I agree with, in principle, with all the drafts that you've done. And, you know, the alternative is to require each new proposal to apply for rezoning to justify the appropriateness of the site. So I think it's a well-written report, and I certainly do appreciate it. With what you were saying about the individuals, how does it affect with the zoning? How would it affect county buildings or township buildings when they're built new? And they have maybe a windmill on the site just to power the building or solar panels. Is that the same? Would that be the same as a private individual, or would there be different exemptions for that? Other than that, if we have a policy to make sure they're going or not going where they are, and we can do that, I fully support this anyway. So if you can answer that question, Bill, that would be fantastic.
If I may, through the mayor to the councillor, I would probably interpret a situation on a county or a municipal building where there's solar panels to be installed just for use on that site as a private property, even though it's a public entity. I guess you could add the word public or private property that's using it for their own purposes, but sometimes when you add words in to clarify, it opens up things you don't expect. So that would be the interpretation I would take on that one. But yeah, you raise a point. I think the part would be connection to the grid versus, and it's interesting because, you know, municipalities I've worked for put in all kinds of solar panels on arena roofs and all sorts of things that went into the grid. So in theory, if that were the case, if that were someone wanting to do that on a public property and connect into the grid, I would say they would need a zoning change. Back then, they just went on the roofs with agreements. So yeah, it's a little more regulatory that way. So if council wanted to get into with a provider and put them all over their municipal buildings and put that into the grid, then you would be making yourself subject to a zoning change, I believe.
Thank you, Bill. Joan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Bill. Can you give us some more feedback or clarification with respect to health and environmental impacts, if any?
Yeah. Through the mayor. I guess there's still a substantial number of people that feel that there are health and environmental impacts from commercial wind turbines. I see them, even though I see them certainly going in great guns all over certainly the United States now, more than ever in more recent years. So I'm not an expert on that part. I personally feel that for migrating birds and other entities, I worry when there's so many in certain locations, or what the impacts they may have on tidal, on the shoreline and so forth, when they're in the water, in the ocean and so forth. And I'm not entirely sure about the personal health impacts, just as an observer more than anything, especially when you have a huge concentration. And I can't imagine what that might be like if you had 30 blinking at night and you're on the farm. I don't know what the real impacts are of it. I would say that the jury is still deliberating on that point. I think as far as what might come to the township in the future, my instinct would be to say maybe a less is more. So if you've got someone wants 150 wind turbines on a property, that might be something that puts the alarm bells up for me. But if we're dealing with 10 or something, that may be okay. But I don't have any scientific understanding of it enough to make that. And obviously we would all have to review whatever studies they brought forward on that. And if you could ask for that, human environmental impacts of their proposals, that could be a study that could be required as part of their application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Monica.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Just through you, Chair, to Bill, and just to the last point that was made by the councillor. Well, we're just taking a look at what I would want to say first is that I do support the initiative to have a structured framework in place when we're taking a look at renewable energy projects, like the one we're discussing in terms of the application process. It is really important that we continue to have public consultation and what that scope would look like. So I don't know if this is really a question, but I would probably say it's more of a strong comment that we would just continue to have that process of inclusive and transparent public input, ensuring that the community's voice is heard and considered in shaping these policies, which is vital for the success of the implementation. So I know it's kind of a very broad subject matter, it's also trending in many different respects, but we do understand there's a lot of undertone of fear that could come up with regards to these kind of projects being implemented. So we just wanted to ensure that the public consultation is there and that the necessary environmental impact assessments are completed and safeguards are in place when decisions are being made going forth.
Thank you, Monica. Barb.
Just one final thing. I appreciate that. I actually am supportive of having the regulation or the requirement for an amendment to come, because that triggers all kinds of studies and various consultations with us and our community. Perhaps this is a question through you, Mayor Milne, to the clerk. Back in 2013, the Council of the Day would pass an unwilling host designation or resolution. That still stands on the books unless repealed by a Council of the Day.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Jason.
I guess just for Bill, more of a clarification. So you said it, I just wanted to hear it at the end of your report again. Council still has control of these projects, basically, is to put it simply. Yeah.
If I may, that's correct. Even if you don't proceed with these initiatives that we've recommended, that control is still there. So, and just to add, the official plan amendment that we're recommending in zoning change, that has to go through a public process. So I'm not sure what the public reaction might be to it. So it could be interesting, but yeah, even the parts that we've recommended have to go through the public process. And so I suppose that's why some municipalities have been hesitant to do things, because that tends to bring out all sorts of perspectives on the issue. So I think we've tried to recommend something that could be seen as permissive, but not too prohibitive. And at least your mind's open to consider these proposals but you ultimately do, and we've confirmed with the county, have the Planning Act controls and then the added prohibition on an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which does not appear to be an option for these applicants if you turn them down. That's not an option. And the county and myself, we believe that's confirmed. So unless they were to take a court challenge to try and force you to approve it, the normal route for Planning Act applications to the OLT is not available.
Thank you, Bill. And I can guarantee any application will be interesting, as Bill said. There is no doubt in my mind. Jason, go ahead.
So I'm not sure who this would be to, but so if council agrees now that we're not a willing host. What's that?
Just for you.
Yeah, for wind. But so yeah, well, that's true, just for wind, but is it not going to save a lot of work if we just say, hey, we're not a willing host? I don't know, I'm just.
Well, that's where we are now.
That, okay.
Currently, that non-willing host resolution
Right.
stands.
Okay.
I mean,
Well-
doesn't say we can't change it, but that's where we're at currently. Historically. You had another question, Barb? No? Good. Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Bill. Moving on to the next, we have a site plan agreement, application from Minerva Shirk. And, could I have someone move that? Jason, second by Joan. Thank you. Bill?
Thank you, Mayor Milne. This is a 40-hectare farm property east of Gray Road 14. It's got 400 meters frontage on Southgate Road 12. Last fall, the lands were rezoned to permit dry industrial use on the property. The site plans come forward. It's been reviewed by staff and it's compliant with the new zone that was approved for the site. There's a 750 square meter limit on the main use itself and 500 square meters of outdoor storage. I think they're slightly under on the OFDU and on the storage amount as far as what they're proposing right now. So this was one that could expand in the future within the current confines of the zoning amendment. Just a reminder that the site plans are a delegated approval right now and still likely. And so it would be up to the clerk based on recommendations from myself and others as to whether the site plan should be signed. But it's been our position that any agreement that's to enforce these conditions does require your approval. And so the agreement has been written to authorize the site plan that's shown and to require the works to be completed appropriately on site. Are recommending that you consider signing the site plan agreement.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Next is the bylaw related to the aforementioned site plan agreement. Care to move that, Barb? Seconded by Joan. Anything to add, Bill?
No,
Nope.
sir.
Okay, any questions? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next is draft plan approval for Glen Elk Phase 3. Someone care to move that, please? Joan, thank you. Seconder? Barb will second that. Thank you. Bill?
Thank you, Mayor Milne. The council knows the location of this property. It's one of 3 that's subject to a minister's zoning order. This case, it's regulation 165/22. The subject site sits between future development lands owned by the applicant and I guess the rail trail, county-owned rail trail. It's 33 hectares of land. The proposed development is at what's called draft subdivision approval stage. So the county is the approval authority for plans of subdivision, as you know. This is a fairly sizable development, 292 single detached units, 24 semis and 75 townhouses. Little samples of the lot sizes here: 10 meters, 10.1 meters frontage, 30 meters depth. That's pretty small single detached lot. So they're certainly maximizing use of the property as far as density. They're around 35 units per hectare. In built up areas in major urban centers, the standard being proposed now is around 50, but that includes employment units. So as far as density goes, that includes employment and residential units. And I just say that as a way of comparison. I feel like this is a fairly high density project for a municipality like Southgate. Certainly maximizing use of the property. I mean, 10-meter frontage lot, for years, the smallest I ever saw was 12. So you're down into what used to be semis. and the semis are at 8 meters. So small units, small lots. That's what infilling and intensification brings forward. There's a little information in the report about different little blocks. You can see walkways, the stormwater management pond, the future right-of-way that would go to Highway 10, the temporary cul-de-sac, and the little section that says 5 future lots. That's a block for an infiltration gallery, and it's a Conservation Authority requirement for a water balance analysis. Certainly no expert on that, but basically the applicant will have to demonstrate that the groundwater is sufficiently maintained in this area, and that section of lots is set aside in case an infiltration gallery is needed. And if it's not, then it could be 5 more lots in that location. There's some background reports that are on our website, and there's access to the county website if you're interested in those reports. I mentioned the infiltration gallery. There's 49 conditions on the developer that would be made in this. The township would be obliged to eventually sign subdivision agreements, a service finance agreement, and the final capacity allocation agreement for the water and sewer allocation. The service finance agreement is one that you've used in the past to deal with offsite servicing. So any water or sewer extensions that the developer is obligated to do to get appropriate water and sewer to the site, that's usually covered under the service finance agreement. And then the subdivision agreement deals with this on-site within the subdivision services. This development will have to be phased because there's not sufficient allocations to do everything all at once. In terms of the layout of the streets and so forth, it makes sense from a design perspective what they've done. Probably most important with this site is the presence of a school block. And there's quite a number of conditions in there that deal with the school site. I think the intent of those conditions was to make it clear that this school site is definitely needed. It's my understanding in conversations with the CAO that the board is regularly asking where this draft plan approval is and when can they get their site. And I'm aware through listening to you and others talk about the community, how much pressure there is on the current school in Dundalk. So this will bring, once it goes forward, hopefully immediate action to provide that service in this community. There's some discussion of the parkland dedication in this project. The park that you see on the subdivision is quite small, but there is also an 8-acre school site in the proposal. So one of the things that we wanted to make it clear was that there is not the same amount of parkland that you might normally get dedicated in this subdivision as you might in others. And that's partly because there's a land trade that I understand is in part discussion with you for parkland to go elsewhere. Also that there's a school site here that schools, once they're built, often provide an open space system for people to use traditionally after hours and the summers. And also there's future development of lands around there that could have also parks included. There's also the rail trail nearby that does provide an open space function. So we're satisfied with the numerous draft plan conditions there that require the phasing, that require them to approach you for preliminary allocations of water and sewer to support that phasing, and that the school site is to be provided and can be developed. And you would have site plan control on the school site when it does come forward. I suppose that would be another agreement that would be available for you to review. Although site plan approval is delegated, at least you would know that the the school site will be investigated as far as traffic and layout and so forth by staff and others. So this proposed subdivision is consistent with the township official plan, which is designated neighborhood area. There's some hazard land there. The zoning is in place through the minister's zoning order. And we believe that the conditions that are proposed protect the municipality's interest, and that you can recommend that the county adopt those draft plan conditions. I should say that the county had an exhaustive consultation process. I guess exhaustive may be the wrong word, but a full consultation process with us and with our municipal engineers, with the applicants and others in preparing these, conservation authority and so forth. So hopefully these conditions cover all the interests of the various agencies as well. And just my last point would be that once the subdivision receives draft plan approval, then our role will be to respond to the developer when they come forward on the phasing. And then also we have a role in coordinating comments and making sure draft conditions are met and the various letters that are needed are there. So I just wanted to assure council that there's nothing will actually happen on there without your approval. And I mentioned the 3 agreements that you have to ensure that. So that's the report. I'd happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Again, thank you for the extensive report. Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. Hello again, Bill. I just mainly have more comments than anything. You did say semis are even smaller than what these lot sizes for the single detached are. You said they were usually 8 meters. On a personal note, you can't be against a development when there's a school lot coming in. I'm not against it, but I was just saddened to see that there were only 24 semi-detached units, 75 townhomes, and the prices of townhomes right now are skyrocketing to the point where they're almost the same as some singles. So is this really an inclusive community? It still looks pretty exclusive to me, but that's just a personal look. I think in the way it does go against the density that the province wants, even though I think in the report it said it was up to 31 per residence per acre. And I'd just like to bring a point up about a letter and another report with the changes in the PPS, that if there is a lot of development going in at one point where it's really, really pushed and what have you, especially around a highway, the province would like to see up to 51 residents per acre. So, is this compliant with the new rules coming out? Because that would mean more semis, which would be affordable for more people. With the block 322, that retention or whatever it's called, the infiltration, does that necessarily Bill, have to go back to the lots, like 5 new homes? Or could that stay in perpetuity as a, not a park with soccer fields on it, but as a green space to augment the storm water? Because there is parkland being transferred, I think in the report it said, to Ida Street. So that's one question. That's the only question really. And it was so great to see the school on there, but I think we have to get clarification on how big a chain link fence is. Is it going to be around the whole 8 acres, 3.3 hectares, or is it just going to be around the school? Because I know in the summertime, if you don't get a permit off these guys, you cannot use that open space land on their property because the gates are locked. So are we really getting anything there except a new school, which is great, don't get me wrong, but there's little nuances like that when I see this, that's no parkland, but you have to get a permit before May 31st to the school board to go on their property, which in my mind, it's our property. It was paid by public money, but if there's questions in there, Bill, you could answer.
If I may, through you, I guess I was shocked to hear the price range of some of the developments that are already in Southgate and where this might be. And that came out in discussions with answering questions with the deputy mayor and others. I'm still shocked to see the prices that might be charged. I'm hopeful that as the supply increases, that maybe the prices decrease. And we're well aware of the initiative, and we'll talk later with the next report about trying to get housing built. And if there was one reason I'm kind of back in this business, it's to see more homes built in wherever they can be built. And in terms of the school site, I think that's something that, as much as you want the school, if I'm around making suggestions to you, and I understand the school board has its policies, and I understand why things might need to be fenced, but in a situation like this, where it's the focal point of a neighborhood, maybe there's ways that some passive space can be set aside that's not fenced. Back to the old days where, when school was out, I took my kids over to the local school and we ran around and kicked a soccer ball, and that's the way it was, and that's not very long ago. So I would want to see that school maybe more open than not, but I mean, I don't want to get into areas where we don't want to get just right now. I think the fact that the school is needed and is more important that there be one than sort of how it might necessarily be used in the future. You will have control over that through the site plan agreement. And I think it's fair to say that since this is a focal point in this neighborhood, that, maybe there's a way that the whole thing isn't fenced and exclusive to getting a permit.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions? Jason?
I too had Martin's concern, like taking away parkland. I kind of think that's crazy myself. As to the MTO, the entrance, we see how long that takes with other projects sitting in limbo. To me, so if this project goes ahead, I know it's down the road and everybody wants the school, that's great, but so we're going to send all the truck traffic through Dundalk again, which nobody wants, for 5 or 6 years until the MTO gets off their and does something. I don't know. To me, it's just, I've said it before, and this development, we have to make sure we do it right. And this is a big step here as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. There's just, you drive through the other projects and you talk to people, and the houses aren't done the way they're supposed to be done and finished, yet we give permits to move in. And we just want to start with another great big phase. This is a huge phase to me. Everybody always worries about ag land. We're popping a bunch of this on ag land too. That's another story. I think it's just, I don't know. I know I'm not going to stop it, but I'm going to voice my opinion. It's just coming. It's just too much, too fast. The parkland, for example, why take away that part just so we can build an extra 5 or 6 houses? Like, maybe, I don't know. It's just, yeah. To me, it's just, I think we should finish some of these other things before we move on with another big project like this. Just a comment.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions, comments? Barb?
Through you, and I'm not sure if we'll need any procedural waiving to go on, but I think I've got the answers from the dialogue with Bill and Dustin. Thank you very much. The infiltration pond, or the infiltration, whatever that is, gallery. That's a test area. So to Martin's point, my question was going to be if there was a need for an infiltration gallery to remain, and it didn't revert back to future lots. I kind of liked where Martin was going, is it kind of being like a nice sitting area around the stormwater management pond. But is there the ability to provide that that passive kind of green space at an infiltration gallery? Or is it, because I don't know what it is, but it was explained and I understand it. But I'm just wondering, Bill, are you able to answer that, or do we need to waive procedure to allow our engineers to speak?
Yeah, if they're there, they could probably tell you better than
Oh,
I
sorry.
what an infiltration gallery would look like. So I couldn't sit here and tell you, because it would depend on what the water balance analysis shows. And so what triggers in my mind there is that, well, if it has to provide a lot of input into the groundwater, then I suppose it might be bigger than if it just had to provide a little bit of input. So I wouldn't want to promise anyone, because I quite frankly don't even know what it might look like or what the size may be. The 5-lot block was picked by the Conservation Authority in terms of what they thought might be a maximum area needed to support the groundwater if need be. So they picked that lot size. But as to what it might look like if it is needed, I really shouldn't try and pass judgment on that, because I can't say.
Mhm. If with council's consideration, perhaps we could, it's not our engineers, it's Crozier, so that we waive procedure to allow our guests to be able to respond should there be this question or others. And I would move that.
Waive procedure to allow that. Absolutely. We can consider that. Is there a seconder? Monica, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Welcome, gentlemen. I think there's some working microphones over there. Please.
Thank you.
So as I understand it, the first question is, what is a infiltration gallery? Please.
Yeah, so normally
Maybe just
oh.
introduce yourself first.
sorry, Justin from Crozier and Associates, and
Thank you.
So yeah, so an infiltration gallery is normally groundwater obviously goes into your lawn and infiltrates down into your and recharges the aquifers and groundwater sources in the area. So the infiltration gallery is set aside mainly as a condition while monitoring of the adjacent wetland is going on. So the purpose is there's an adjacent wetland to the north, which is going to be the primary outlet for the stormwater management facility. And until we have final numbers on what that wetland can receive in terms of water, we need to have this infiltration gallery set aside so that water can be directed to the infiltration gallery and sent down into the ground instead of out to the wetland. So that's kind of the studies that need to have happen to either permit or use that or have to use that infiltration gallery. So that's the purpose of the infiltration gallery at a high level. In terms of what that infiltration gallery will look like, there's many options. There's tons of technology out there and evolving methods which allow you to either like use it's basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a bit like a granular layer, which then the water is directed into that granular layer, and then it just sits there until it soaks into the ground. This one will be a continuously infiltrating. So what will happen is there will be water that is treated and cleaned by the stormwater management pond, and it'll outlet to the infiltration gallery, and it'll be directed into the ground. So that's the function of that. And what the surface treatment is, so if there's a granular base, you could basically put topsoil on it and put grass over top of it. People can use it. You wouldn't want to drive like heavy equipment and stuff on that, like other than lawnmowers, just for compaction purposes. But that's essentially what that could be used for.
Very good. Thank you.
And
any other?
If I'm-
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
just in terms of the parkland, because I know there's a lot of questions around that. We're not. We just wanted to clarify that we're not removing the parkland that should be allocated for this subdivision. It's being shifted from that particular development and moved over to the Ida Street subdivision, where it can be more efficiently used for like soccer fields and baseball diamonds and stuff like that, in combination with the parkland dedication over on that property. So that was the reasoning behind that transfer.
Thank you. And if I recall correctly, and maybe the CEO could comment, I believe our Director of Recreation recommended something similar to that effect, so that the sum of the total of the various pieces of parkland could be amalgamated into one chunk to provide a bigger area. Is that sort of what I understood?
Through you, your worship, that's absolutely correct. It was difficult, as you know, to get a property that was big enough to be utilized for some of the recreation needs of the community. And we're lucky that we've had that opportunity to work with the developer to be able to provide a bigger space that we can develop some of these recreation needs that the community is wanting, specifically through our community strategic plan, all that consultation that we did through that process showed that that's what the community is looking for. So we're trying to meet those needs.
Okay, thank you. Joan, do you have a question?
Thank you, through the chair. More of a comment. As Councillor Rice said, it is a really large development that is coming, and all these fancy words, infiltration gallery, park block, walkway block, temporary cul-de-sac. Speaking about recreation needs in a park over in Wherry Ridley, that area where we have hundreds of kids. I don't know if you've been in there, Councillor Soares, you're there. You see all these children, and all we got was a sitting area. There is no park, and the sitting area was not fully maintained. And I would agree that we should get more things finished before we move on to another thing. We need a park in that area, a real park where kids can go out and play. That's just my comment on that. So all these fancy words, and there's still no park. There's still nothing down there with hundreds of kids. Finish that, and then we'll be satisfied to move on to something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Who wants to comment to that in regards to what's going on? I understand the Norm Jack Park is under development. I'm not sure
We could.
what sort of timelines we're thinking. I mean, to be honest, we're kind of straying off here.
yes.
We're really straying off here, actually, but I'm going to allow Ray to comment.
Good morning, members of public, staff, and any members of the public in attendance. As many of you know, my name's Corey. I'm the with MHBC Planning and the planning consultant on the file. Just to answer Councillor John's question regarding the park over on the Edgewood Green site. So the large park is located within what we refer to as Phase 11, which is the phase that you can see from Highway 10 as you're coming into town. Our team has been working hard to register that phase. So Justin here may correct me, but we've completed all of the earthworks and the pre-servicing in that block. And the biggest barrier to being able to register that phase, and when we register, the lots are legally created and we can building permits. So that's the final barrier before you start to see houses under construction. And it's unique to that phase, is getting the final clearance from MTO because of that access right onto the highway. So our team, in coordination with staff from the township, have been working hard to secure all the final MTO requirements and permits. I'm not an expert in that field, but I've learned a bit, and there's a lot of them. And it takes quite a bit to get through that process. I can say we did just receive the MTO's clearance letter late yesterday. So that was really the final holdup, or the cork in the bottle. So I suspect we will be back in front of you fairly shortly to proceed with the recommendation for final registration of that phase, which then gets forwarded to the county as well for final approval. But we've been working a long time on the MTO requirements, and actually that did just come through yesterday, which was great news.
Thank you, Corey. Any other questions? Monica.
Hi there, just through you, Chair, to Justin and Corey. Nice to see you again. And just to the point of the recent comments that were just made by council members here, it is true that there are very much a need for updates and projected timelines for what is already currently happening in our area. We do see this wonderful phase that's, coming forward. But we have to understand that we must, given the complexity of the scale of this development, continuous oversight is crucial. I would recommend regular updates to council on the progress of the development, focusing on adherence to the approved conditions and mitigation of any emerging issues. With that being said, given the scale of the proposed development, like how will the township ensure that we can support the additional load when we take a look at roads, water, supply and sewer services? And I know I talked to you before about understanding how this all works, and I guess just coming off Good Roads conference is very, I learned a lot about how important this infrastructure is, the one that's unseen. I don't know if there's going to be plans to upgrade these systems in anticipation of the increased demand. And what Councillor John said is very true, because in our area, and I have a 6-year-old, 13-year-old, so just like was being said before, how many playgrounds are we going to have? How soon will they be made? Will they be made at the beginning or at the end? Many have said that in the current development, playground was put in place. There's not enough, and it was put in a late time, so no one could really even enjoy it. So there are concerns that are being raised. I am a strong proponent of finishing what we have started first before moving into a development that's going to be a grand scale. I really appreciate the map that was provided, but I'm no engineer and I will never pretend to be one. I find that even just getting out there and looking at the land, looking at the locations, looking at the zoning, getting a better understanding for council, like what is happening and the anticipation that's coming on. As far as the Crozier traffic impact study, how does the plan address potential traffic increases? Are there adequate provisions for traffic management, especially with the expected increase in school traffic? So I guess from my time being on council in this short time, in my research and historically seeing how things have been moving along and understanding where things are going, I think there is a really important moment to take a look at, almost like if you were to have, this was supposed to be done, when is it getting done? What is still outstanding? How are we going to get there? Okay, now we're going to move to the next thing. How are we going to make sure that these are going to be in line? Because we're the ones facing, the residents are coming to us and saying, you all are bringing more and more in. And then, you know, things like our taxes, we're paying like another municipality like Brampton, but we're not having the services. And then they hear the answer, well, we have to have time to build these things. But then they're like, well, if we need time to build these things, why are we building more? So this is a very honest question from the residents, and we are conduits. So that's what essentially these questions are for. I'm 100% behind the school. I'm 100% behind sustainable development. I really just, I asked a whole bunch of comments and questions because I know that when I leave this here, like all of us here, when we go back, we will be asked. So if anyone wants to have a chance to answer any of those things, I really appreciate it. So we can go back to the residents.
Thank you, Monica. Lots of good discussion or lots of good questions. Gentlemen, are you interested in responding or? Okay.
Yeah, through the chair. So just to touch on your engineering, because that's my background. So the studies, the traffic impact, I'm not a transportation engineer, but I do have a bit of knowledge from my colleagues at my office. There are a number of roadway upgrades that are identified with this project. So in order to support the school specifically because of the traffic that's generated by a school block. And I believe that aligns with the Bradley Street street right of way, the Gray Street right of way, and the Osprey Street right of way, all the way out to Main Street in the town to support specifically the school. A bunch of other infrastructure upgrades will be happening along that leg of roadway as well, including lowering and increasing the size of the sanitary sewer. As we know, there's an ongoing EA, I think, and even going to I don't know the exact status right now, but the wastewater treatment plant upgrades to support the increased growth in the community. And again, there's the service financing agreement also speaks to the external upgrades that the developer are going to have to do to support this development. So we are doing good engineering to support the growth in the community and working with the town's engineer hand in hand, essentially. And we have a good working relationship with them. So.
Thanks, Justin. I'll just jump in to answer some of the other questions. So to start, the question around timing. So the stage we're at right now is the draft plan approval stage. As Mr. White mentioned, there is, I believe it's 49 conditions that need to be satisfied before this development would be able to proceed to that registration phase where building permits would start to be pulled. So in our experience, that's typically from the date we receive draft plan approval, that's typically 1 to 1.5 years. And again, it depends on time of year and lining up. Usually the typical start of construction is spring, so it depends on the seasons. Whereas I believe the rest of Edgewood, phase 11, the intent is to build that out this summer. We did receive that MTO clearance, which we've been working hard to receive. So that was good news. So these things do run in parallel, but there's not shovels in the ground tomorrow on this site. Should council approve the draft plan, there is still a significant amount of work, detailed engineering, et cetera, to be done to register this site before you today. The one item in regards to phasing, which was discussed between the township, the county, and the school board, is there is a condition in there that says the school block needs to be included in the first phase. Understanding the priority for the municipality to see that school block move forward, the school can't move forward until that school block is registered and created. So that is enshrined here within the conditions. Another concern we heard was about construction traffic through this process. Recalling back at the public meeting, that was a comment we heard. There has been work done on our side along with the township, and the intent would be to proceed with this site before Glen Oak Phase 2, which is the site on the west side of the rail tracks. And a construction access has been secured off of Ida Street. So that would, the construction traffic would come off of Ida across Glen Oak Phase 2, which would be undeveloped, into this site. So it would avoid construction coming up from the south through those existing neighborhoods. So that way we can mitigate that concern as much as possible. As we do advance the detailed design process, as Mr. White mentioned, the site will need to be phased. So we will need to work with the municipality to determine what is the first phase and what gets included. So those discussions would happen in the future.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I have clarity.
Monica?
Follow-up. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for those answers. Just for a point of clarity, with accepting this draft plan approval, do we have more input on what's gonna actually go in there? Like, for example, has there been consideration to have a low-rise building? Is this something that, like, when this goes through, I know things can change, but I guess what I'm asking is, like, I just feel like Councillor Rice said it is really a big undertaking. This is pretty huge, probably one of the biggest developments. I don't know, I could be wrong, but it could be up there. Do we have more input in as to what's going to actually be going in? And do we have a chance as a council to kind of like go out there, maybe even together? I'm just putting that out there to go and actually get a tour to see here's where the townhouses are going to go, and here's the school lot, and here is this, because it's such a big area. I don't know, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, like if that's something that's possible before approving this, that we can actually go do something like that. I'm just kind of like openly asking CAO. It's just an open question like that to ask.
I can start, and then if Miss Lindy has anything to add. I can certainly take that request back to our client. I can't commit to anything here today. I do feel like having a long working relationship with him, that is something he would be open to in the future, is maybe not just this site, but probably all of their lands within, if there's a day that gets set up to go around. I think our request would be not to delay the approval of this for that to happen. We can't start on detailed design until this receives draft plan approval. If we're successful today, we still have to go to county committee of the whole, county council. So that's probably another month before it receives final approval from the county. And then we need to get started on that detailed design process. And again, the school really can't proceed with their process on the school block until that first phase is registered. So any sort of further delay at this point is just pushing those overall timelines out. So that would be certainly our request. But I can certainly take that request back to our client and likely put him in touch with the CAO to see if something could be scheduled.
Thank you. Appreciate that response. Barb, did you have, or Monica?
Yes, Chair, just wondering, like, how final is this plan? Like, this is a draft approval plan, I understand, but how final is this?
And I can apologize, I didn't answer that in my previous response. So it is essentially final once this is draft plan approved. So it sets the lot fabric. The owner can come back and apply for red line revisions in the future if he chooses to propose any changes to the lot fabric. At this time, there is no apartment buildings proposed within this development. This Glen Oak Phase 3 site is a small portion of a much larger land holding to the east, where you see that future road connection, which would head towards Highway 10. We haven't gotten into the detailed planning on those lands, but in the concept plans we had prepared at the time the MZO was done, there were lands identified there closer to the highway that were envisioned for some apartment buildings.
Barb?
Thank you. And I really do appreciate the answers. I know that in our MZO agreement in the schedules, it states that MZO require and establish a mixed residential housing development needed to include affordable and attainable and mixed use intensification housing options, including rental stock. And I can appreciate that this is a section in the middle of 2 additional phases that will, or it could be 5 phases, however works out. And that there might be additional parkland within those phases that are outside this block. What I can appreciate is that school is a priority, and we have been advocating for years for a new school. One of my questions, and I have a couple. If the school board, if the province were to approve a new school after we have the draft plan approval, can the school proceed with is there a possibility that the school could be built before the rest of the stormwater management plan? Well, probably not, but there's going to be certain things that are going to have to fall into place. But it doesn't have to wait for the houses to be built in order for us to get that new school, is my first question.
Thank you. And through Councillor Dobreen, that's an excellent question. I can just answer based on my experience. I have worked on a few other subdivisions where there were school blocks involved. In my experience, I don't believe that would be the case. I think if the school block had existing road frontage and existing services right at the doorstep, it might be a possibility. But in this case, the roads, the services need to be extended. So at a minimum, if you have the plan in front of you, the Bradley Street would need to come up in the Street A across the top. The stormwater management pond would need to be in place. And as I mentioned, those services extended. So for all that pre-servicing to happen, we need to go through detailed engineering design, which is in support of registering a first phase. So at that point, if I can't speak from definitively, but if the owner's investing all the resources to put the pipes in the ground and the roads, the registration of that first phase will include a portion of the development. So the date it's registered, the school could theoretically start, but also the owner could start pulling building permits to initiate housing construction. So based on the meetings I've been involved with the school board, and I believe township staff have probably been involved in a few more than I have, it does sound like they are very anxious to proceed. So, which isn't always the case. Sometimes they set aside school blocks and it's kind of like, we'll kind of wait and see if we need it in a few years. But in this case, they're following up with our office, just like they're following up with the township. So based on that, I would envision sort of a construction start, likely aligning that there'd be the schools starting and those first houses starting around the same time.
So thank you.
Dina has a comment there.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, your worship, through you. If I can just add to Corey's comments, I think something that may give council a little help here is the timing of the draft plan approval and how that helps with the school. The school is, or the Blue Water District School Board is continually asking about draft plan approval for one reason, and that's the capital financing. So draft plan approval, and I think Mr. Mayor and I've had the experience at our various conferences with Minister Lecce, and the reason he took very much interest in this was because that and asked certain questions regarding shovel ready. And one of the reasons that draft plan approval is important is because draft plan approval will consider this shovel ready for the school to get financing. And it's a really pivotal piece. And we all know that Minister Lecce in our last meeting talked about just how important it is and how they're ready to start delving out some of these funds for these schools. So I want council to understand kind of the timing of this, and missing the boat here could be very real if we don't have this in place for the school. So just to understand the timing of this, and the draft plan approval means shovel ready for school funding. And that's why the school is being so, I guess, I won't say aggressive, but continually asking for updates on draft plan approval.
So I realize that Councillor John has her hand up, but I do have some more questions.
Carry on.
Thank you. Pardon me? Yeah, some. So I got a lot of them answered, actually. And thank you, Dina, and thank you, everyone. So I'm reassured that I can see why this middle piece is being put forward first, because it has the school block. We are at 140% capacity on both our schools, with a lot of safety concerns and portables. So I appreciate that there are a lot of, steps that have to go into the mix in order to get it there. Because this is an MZO, one of 3, and it forced the municipality to expand their urban boundary. And maybe this is a question for Jim Ellis, or the CAO, and we don't have capacity to build out that whole MZO or the other 2. Do any upgrades for our water and wastewater facilities in order to provide capacity, is that all covered by the developer, because we would not have needed to do so otherwise in order to manage the 3 MZOs that forced our urban boundary expansion? I'm asking as to, I know that usually the developer handles all of the water and wastewater and all of that infrastructure, roads within the development, but anything that goes up to it is kind of our expense, but we wouldn't have to go up there if we didn't have the MZO. Thank you. That's my first. I think Dina wants to.
Perhaps I'll start. And I think that there's a reason that developers pay development charges for these things, and our wastewater treatment facility upgrade is planned and moving forward this year. I know council is aware that we have applied to the Housing Enabled Water Infrastructure Fund. So for that funding to be able to upgrade, so by 2025, we will have capacity wastewater wise. But I'll let Jim maybe continue if there's anything else he has.
Jim, you want to add anything, please?
Good morning, good people. Well, the water situation is good, but as you know, we are progressing to look for the next well site. So that is on our horizon. And again, looking even further out for the next site for a water tower. So these are things we are looking at. Development charges will be applicable that will work towards the payment of these big goals that we have to achieve. So development is paying for development. It's not straddled on the taxpayer. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
And I realized in the report that the school board has up to 7 years to activate that school site. I do hope, and my comment here is not really a question, but a desire to, like the parkland that the other phases are still waiting for in phase 11, that it's not 6-7 years before that school is built, that we're not waiting for all of the houses and everything to be in place before we get that school, because we don't have room for more portables. That's just, I appreciate that this is coming forward first, as opposed to perhaps the one in the west or the one in the east. My other question is about Highway 10 access. Are we actively pursuing, I believe we are, that future right of way to Highway 10, that it could potentially get access to this phase, this block, in order to alleviate the traffic getting to Ida? Because, how are they coming in from Ida? Are they going downtown Dundalk to get to Ida to go up? Or are they coming across 24 and down, or up 8? And that road use agreement or haul route, if we can continue to move on that access to Highway 10, we'll be in a better position to alleviate traffic, to gain that extra access that we so desperately need, because the traffic going through Dundalk is horrendous now. Just some of my comments and concerns with regard to how this is all going to come together. We're another 20 years of building. People are getting tired, and we're the ones who hear it all. When is the park going to come? I hear it from the Jack family. Where are the soccer fields? Now, reassuringly, you did say maybe this summer, because I understand one of the soccer fields is already built, and the only thing that was holding back was the other soccer field and the parking area, a lot of which we gave up. So if maybe you could speak to that or perhaps it's not an answer at this point in time, but that you'll take it under advisement. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments through Councillor Dobreen. As I mentioned, the owner is pushing ahead on the remaining phase 11 on Edgewood, and the intent right now is for that to be completed this summer. For this site, the connection to Highway 10, so that was always identified as we went through the MZO process. There were discussions with the province at that time. Through this process, we were asked to re-engage MTO, advise them this is a future connection. So that was done. There was more recent correspondence. We can also confirm for those on council that were on council when Edgewood first went through, there was an issue with the connection and the proximity to the intersection with Main Street. MTO is pretty significant distances they like to see between intersections. So we do have that separation distance we need on the lands to the east. It is going to push that access to the north. Likely a very similar distance to the one you'll see on Edgewood when that connection comes through. So I can say that those discussions have taken place with MTO. The final kind of layout and design of that side will be part of a future draft plan that would encompass the balance of those lands east of this site.
Sure.
Thank you for everyone's indulgence. Oh, just one final comment. While I would like to see more attainable, achievable housing prices, given I've seen some of Flattow's price lists, and a 1,500 square foot townhouse listed at $1 million to start is really hard to imagine as being anywhere achievable for many people wanting to enter into the home buying or property ownership realm. Having said that, I also understand that, okay, this isn't the phase that Flatto is proposing a rental unit, a low rise, or however many floors were allowed. But I I keep focusing on the end game that we will have a school site and that the province is seriously looking at approving that so it can get started. So while I'd love to see more affordable units or more achievable units, I understand the proposal before us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Joan, you had another comment or question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I just wanted to say, I've been in the school and a lot, and I've worked in the school and I've seen the portable, but I feel like now, is it fair to say, I mean, this might be a little bit out there that our hands are tied with this phase because of the importance of the school. I feel like we're going to be wearing an on-cuff now just to get this Glenelg fake right off the bat, and not to pushing it too much. I know you said, you spoke about, yes, the park is coming and everything is going to be finalized this summer. I've been hearing that for the past 2 years, so I really hope that it will be finalized this summer. But I guess I'm going to keep my hands tied because we really want the school and we're interested in the school. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Monica?
Thank you, Chair. Just through you, Chair, in January with Mayor Millen and CAO, and I believe Councillor Shipston, we were all in attendance for the delegation with Minister Lecce for this very reason, to have the school. So again, I just wanted to highlight the fact that I'm 100% behind the school. My children are in the school. My children are in the portables. So I wanted to be very clear that I'm 100% in support of that. I'm almost in tears about it, the idea of it coming to pass. I am in tears. Let me fix that. I am in tears about it. I am in tears with the other parents that how much we need it. With that being said, and to the CAO, absolutely, to the point of the shovel ready. I was in the room when that was said, and absolutely, I've had discussions with him as well, and we really want that. I am newer than many and newer to the area, so I'm just going to throw it out there because I know everyone's schedules are busy. I wanted to ask some questions previous to the meeting, but I'm going to ask them here. Is there a possibility, because I know we've been waiting for so long and it's going to take time anyhow to get things moving, is it possible in the month of May that the council can get out there and take a look? And because this draft approval is final, that's what I'm hearing, that because that's the part that I'm getting a little bit hesitant to go support this today. I'm not sure if I'm going to support it. I want to support it, but I'm not sure if I can at this moment. I really would want to get out there and take a look and do my due diligence to see exactly what everything is happening, so I can answer and say, yes, I saw this. I did take a look and we went out there. Is this unprecedented? Is this something that has happened in the past? I don't know. So I'm just honestly asking from a place of just making sure if it, in the month of May, if we could kind of like get out there. And the other question, and this might not be popular or maybe it is or not, I don't really care, but I'm just wondering if in the idea of a public meeting with such a big phase and concerns, I mean, is there an idea to have a public meeting, a somewhat of a town hall, something of where the voice of the people can come out and talk about what's going on, because this is really huge. And just being in the streets with speaking to people in their garages, at the park and the Foodland and all these places, we are answering it. And I live right in the heart of the matter. So that's why I'm really being the voice right now. So Mayor, I'm not sure if some of these questions can be answered now, or if there's a way to kind of defer this approval so that we can maybe see about getting out there and getting more engagement just in the month of May even, and then coming back. So I'm just presenting that and asking the council for your guys' guidance and what you all think about that.
I guess maybe I would respond by saying that we have advocated, myself and council and staff, we have advocated hard for this new school. And we have advocated hard for more housing, more affordable housing, but more housing into the market, because it's a supply and demand thing. I'm not sure, in fact, I am sure that a walk around in a field, because that's what it is currently, it's a field, it's an open field. I know that walking around in the field is not going to answer any questions any more than looking at this diagram, because this is what it's going to look like. Walking around in the field isn't going to answer any questions. None of my questions anyway. others may have different opinions. So I guess to not put too much of a point on it, to get cold feet at this stage, it's a little bit late. We've been advocating for this school. We've advocated with the minister. We've advocated with the developer. And he has been very adamant that he is willing to provide almost 8 acres, I believe it is, for this school. I don't know how many houses he can put in that 8 acres. I'm sure the engineers could tell us, but it would be quite a few. And for him to give up that land for a school, I think demonstrates that he is committed to this community, notwithstanding the frustrations that we're hearing today about what has gone on. But we can't debate what has gone on necessarily today because the report in front of us is asking for draft approval for this project. So I'm hoping that council will support the draft approval to allow this to continue to move on, because as you heard, Councillor Singh Soares, when Minister Lecce asked, is this project shovel ready? I said to him, yes, it is. And as soon as the frost comes out of the ground, we're ready to go. That was maybe stretching it just a little bit to say that to the minister, but I think he appreciated the subtleties there. So for us to say, well, yeah, we want the school, we want more development, we want more housing, but oh, we're going to put it off for another month, another 2 months. I don't want to lose this school. And there is tremendous demand for new schools right across the province. And for the school board to see the township now back up a little bit and say, well, we're not just sure. Move on. Somebody else will get the new school. We need the new school. We need a lot of things, but this is one that is very high on the list. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Anyone else want to?
Can I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I know I certainly appreciate that. I can't say it enough as well that I'm 100% supportive. I was in their room and I have kids in there. So, and I'm not by any means wanting to delay it nor lose the funding. I guess that just being in talks with the residents and things like that, is there a way that there could be a flexibility in the final, just with other things like the other, I don't know, I'm trying to find the right words to revising, because I know that when we were having other things built, some things changed along the way. I'm just wondering if there's any kind of flexibility in that regard. I mean, and I know what you're saying about walking in a field, and I'm not suggesting that we walk in a field, just to kind of get a visual of everything. If that's not of the interest of the council to do that, that's fine. I can go and, drive around myself. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I started off by saying I am supportive of all of this. It's just, I have the voice of residents also to consider to bring here. And yeah, I definitely wanted to have the school and I still do. So yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I guess there's zero flexibility for minor considerations if needed. Like, is there any wiggle room?
So, thank you for the comments through Councillor Soares. As I mentioned earlier, the draft plan approval, if we're successful today and through the county, it does set this parcel fabric. It doesn't mean we can't come back and propose to change it. So my recommendation would be, if there was some sort of, I'm going to suggest a full redraw of the plan will likely be out the window at some point, because we're locking in a road pattern. We're going to start detailed engineering design. But if there is some sort of minor change that council would like to see, I would just ask that request be made to the owner and they can consider it. And there is a mechanism that we can come back and ask for changes, but I certainly can't commit to anything on their behalf today. But there is a process, and we have had to do red line revisions as we advance through Edgewood Greens, where through detailed engineering design, we had to shift a walkway block or a drainage block. There was little changes like that did occur through that process. I think that's all I can add at this time.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb?
Through you, this you've gotten a lot of comments and feedback and consideration. We're expressing our concerns for our community. Two things. There is along Street E, there is a series of, I'm guessing those are not town, though maybe they're semis or single family dwellings. I'm not sure. But if there were an opportunity to have a low rise or rental units, then there are spots in here that if consideration was given or it was desirable by the developer to look at our comments and our concerns, there are places that might accommodate those types of structures that wouldn't impose, shadowing and all of that over, somebody's backyard, but would be in proximity to the school. So I'm supportive of that. And, from my understanding is there's not a no trespass sign. If somebody wants to go and walk and have a look at the field where it's at the top of Bradley Street, there will be those opportunities. My only question was, if I recall, was there not an open house where it showed this potential? I know that it was in the paper or on social media or somewhere, because I saw the proposed development before it even came here. So was there an open house? I thought there was.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Dobreen. And I think that going back to the time of the MZO, which I know was before CAO Lundy's time at the township, there was it was online. I think we were in the midst of the pandemic at the time, but it was online. Flato had organized it. But we did work with township staff to post it on the township website and social media and that sort of thing. So there was an open house. It was for all 3 sites at that time. I had presented and we heard comments from the public. There was also a public meeting specific to this draft plan. The date's escaping me now, but within the last year, I'll say that there was the required public meeting for this draft plan of subdivision as well.
Thank you, Corey. Any further discussion or questions? Jason?
Just a comment, I guess, to your point, Brian, I totally agree with you. I guess I'll say I changed my mind. I come in here. Well, I keep hearing everybody's for development. I don't hear that in the public, but everybody here says that. But anyway, that's fine. The last thing I want to do is hold up a school, for sure. We need it very badly. To Joan's point, though, and I'm going to vote for yes for it now. Probably committed, I wasn't. But to Joan's point, I'm going to put it out there, and if people don't like it, that's good. I see what she's saying. It's almost like the developer is tying her hands. It's all tied back to the school, which everybody gets emotional. We get it. And if you're listening, Mr. Shakir, I would like you to contact us more often. Maybe the CAO is contacted, but council is so blind on stuff. Maybe it's just me. I don't know, but I hear stuff from people. I hear stuff that this is happening. Saying all that, I'm going to vote for it because we need this school very badly. But going forward in the next phases, I think we have to have a lot more communication with this developer and a lot more listening to our constituents and the public of what we actually want. Because we hear it, we heard it, we hear it, we heard it. It's not, what we're doing is not what the public tells us. So I don't know where the gap is, but if you could send that back to Mr. Shakir, and maybe he's listening, that I'd like going forward to have more information of what his plan is. What is this? Because we keep saying, yeah, it's great that he's giving us that school site. Excellent. Thank you. He's benefiting too. We all know that. Let's forget, we all know that. Anyway, that's a comment. I'm going to vote for it because of the school. That is the only reason.
Thank you, Jason.
And Mayor, just one last comment, quick comment, 30 seconds. Yes, just to that point, I agree completely with everything that Councillor Rice just mentioned. And just to the last point, I appreciate that through you, Chair, to Corey, about what you mentioned with regards to the red line visions and accommodations, possibilities you can't confirm, but I get that. So that really helped me quite a bit, and I too would support it.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've had pretty good discussion. I'll give everybody one last chance. Anything? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input today.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, let's have a recess. 7 o'clock, we'll reconvene at 11:10. Okay, thank you, Holly, for firing up that machine back there. One more report under the planning section. It is regarding a provincial planning statement and our response to it. Someone care to move that, please? Monica and Barb, thank you. Bill? Welcome back. Well, I guess you
Hello.
left, but thanks for sticking around.
No, it's very interesting to watch the growing pains, and I think you're being very thoughtful about things, and changes like this to the legislation will give us more reason to contemplate where we're going as a province and as a community.
Yep.
The proposal outlined in the report, this is more changes to provincial policy, more changes to legislation. I'm not sure if council involved themselves in provincial planning statement from last year, 2023, but that was under consultation through into August of last summer. And it was a significant departure from what was provincial policy statement 2020 from the year 2020, in that it took what is volumes and volumes of provincial policy and encapsulated it into something much more streamlined in order to encourage housing growth. It's in particular more of a change south of Southgate, where the growth plan is in effect, and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe has been one of the major things that has controlled a lot of development south of us in Southgate. Bill 185 has received a second reading. I'm not sure if it's reached third reading just yet, but we've rolled in that conversation into this report, which first focused on the new provincial planning statement that has been out and is out for comment for another 2 weeks. By way of background, there's 4 bullet points at the bottom of the first page of the report that shows you all the changes that have happened in the last 2 or less years to the Planning Act, to provincial policy statements. And these are things that your past and current staff have been adjusting to, and developers have been adjusting to, and members of the public as well as you. These changes have been probably the most significant I've seen in the last 30 years of doing this. And it's been a real challenge to keep up with everything. And I give a lot of credit to your staff who have been adjusting to this for a couple of years now. And it looks like if Bill 185 goes through, there'll be more changes to be made. And some of them are moving back to the way things were. This is, of course, all meant to encourage exactly what's happening in Southgate, and that's creation of new housing. And I would say that, just as an observation from a little far away, that Southgate is certainly doing its job and more to create housing. But what you just experienced in your last discussion is the growing pains that any community will face that has to deal with the kind of growth you're dealing with. And it's the kind of growth that the province wants and needs. I guess the frustrating point for me is that despite all the growth that's occurring there and in other places, you still see the kinds of prices you're seeing. And I'm not sure. I'm hopeful that it will have an impact long term, and certainly support, as a general sense, streamlining and making sure that legislation is clear and rules are clear. As a general sense, I think that's a good thing for development. But as you can see by your discussions, if it starts to feel like it's too fast for communities, that's where issues come. That's why I believe the province in their changes to the provincial planning statement are wanting infrastructure planning to follow along with housing development. But that's easier said than done because there's only a certain amount of money out there. And I will, as an observation, second observation, say you do seem to have certainly consulting people that are well-intentioned and want to work with you on these issues. And I've certainly found them responsive in any questions and concerns and that I've had to bring forward from a planning perspective. In terms of provincial planning statement 2024, it is called a planning statement now, not a policy statement. Planning statement. There's a dozen or so bullet points at the bottom of page 2 that probably isn't telling you anything you didn't already know. There's major support for intensification, providing a range and mix of housing, garden suites, multi-generational low and mid-rise apartments. I heard some of you speak about that earlier. The density figure of 50 residents and job per hectare, that's an interesting formula that they're applying to large municipalities. On the residential side, you're at 31. I'm not sure what your density would be when you factor in the employment on that. It's kind of it's an aspirational target, let's put it that way. I think you're experiencing densities that are in line with the provincial planning statement as it's written, I believe, certainly with this phase coming forward and maybe others. Provincial planning statement 2023 had some fairly definitive statements about rural and agricultural development. It encouraged multi-lot residential development in rural areas, and I put in brackets estate subdivisions, and Southgate, like many rural communities, has its estate subdivisions. That particular provision about multi-lot residential has been removed. It does still allow lot creation in rural areas, which you do have, but I think it's fair to say they backed off the aggressive push for estate subdivisions as being a way to generate new housing. It's not completely off the table, but I think that was a pretty telling change. And I haven't had that discussion with you about your perspective on estate subdivisions. I know we're dealing with some inquiries now around Wilder Lake and others that would suggest that developers feel like they'd like to move forward some estate type developments. But as of now, it's still not entirely encouraged. Let's put it that way. And certainly less so since 2023, when they were out and out supporting it. There's still private service flexibility. So the ability to have water, private water, well water, and septic systems, it's still in there. They removed policies that allow lot creation in prime ag areas. I'm not sure back last summer if you heard about that, but there was some indication that in prime ag areas, they would allow severance of certain residential units. And it also said that official plans and zoning bylaws at the local level could not be more restrictive than the provincial planning statement as drafted at that time. Both those things have been removed. So we're back to prime agricultural areas not being allowed surplus farm, or only allowed surplus farm severances, lot additions, the things that you're typically used to. What did remain in there was the 3 residential units per farm property. I mentioned the removal of the statement that you can't be more restrictive than that, but they are allowing within the farm cluster in prime agricultural areas to have supportive housing either for workers or for other people who choose to live on a farm. And that would be implemented through the zoning bylaw amendment that we'll be talking about in a future meeting, allowing additional residential units in urban areas. And this policy, if it's adopted after May 15th, would allow you to do it in prime agricultural areas as well. And that will be a decision that you will make as a group, because now provincial policy allows you to be more restrictive if you want to. Settlement areas, you know about, they're the focus of growth still, primarily fully serviced with municipal water and sewer like Dundalk. Those areas are where growth is to go. They like to encourage mixed use development. I'm not sure there are older shopping areas, commercial retail centers in Dundalk, but in places where some of those are being underused now, they're encouraging more residential development going into these places where commercial may be not as active as it once had been. But they're still protecting major employment areas, industrial parks such as you have. Again, we see schools pop up at the top of page 3 of the report, integrating planning with transportation of goods and people, and consider multiple uses for schools in neighborhoods. It's a general policy statement. I think they were talking about schools that eventually could be, if demand dropped, that could be transitioned to other uses, say for seniors or whatever, community education facilities, but it could also mean for open space. And it's certainly a discussion when that school comes forward, hopefully in the next year or so, that we talk to them about that as a group, integrating planning for the school and how it might support that neighborhood. There's a definite protection to specialty crop areas and agriculture and the agri-food network. And so a lot of the fairly aggressive things on prime ag lands and rural development, as far as residential unit creation, are backed off to some degree. Maybe I'll go into Bill 185 real quickly. It is only in second reading. There's a couple of points that I'll make on that one that are a little bit concerning, and it appears that they're removing certain public appeal rights on official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments, not just ones that apply to affordable and attainable housing, which kind of used to be the effect, but you saw with severances, the appeal right was taken away for third parties like neighbors. So they can't appeal those. You've now heard that for renewable energy projects, applicants can appeal a council decision. And Bill 185 seems to build upon that, where appeal rights for official plan zoning amendments, unless they're in green belts and so forth, may not be appealable by neighbors. And if this is what's intended by Bill 185, I'm hoping you'll have a discussion about what that means. It's a profound change to how things have worked in Ontario for many years. There was always a right for a neighbor to appeal something that they didn't like, but sometimes that appeal wasn't used for the right reasons. Sometimes it resulted in a better development. But the right to appeal has always been something that has remained there, but slowly it has been pulled out of the Planning Act, and Bill 185 appears to be another attempt to remove some of those appeal rights. In terms of settlement area boundaries, it's not so much of an issue in Grey County, in Southgate, but now developers can apply for amendments to expand a settlement boundary. They have to go through a fairly comprehensive process to do that, and they would, under Bill 85, have the right to appeal that if council didn't grant their settlement area boundary adjustment. I know that that's created some concern at the county level, that what does that mean? Will boundaries be easily expanded, more easily expanded without councils being able to prevent it? I would say that the ability to expand a settlement boundary really is only, the restrictions on it have really only been in the last 10 years or so, maybe 10, 15 years. Before that, you could expand settlement boundaries just the way they're proposing it here, through proper reports and an assessment of need. So I'm not too worried about the ability to change settlement boundaries, including rural settlement boundaries. I think council would always want to work with a developer and listen to their planners and the county planners and the agencies when looking at these boundaries. But just as it's important for, I think, neighbors to have appeals on certain applications, probably it's a good thing that developers have appeals on settlement boundary adjustments. The other last point on Bill 185 is the settlement or the site plan approval zoning penalties that were being imposed on staff if certain applications weren't processed within 90 days and 120 days and so forth. Looks like they're going to pull those out, which is very welcome. They've changed how pre-consulting on applications goes as well. I'm not sure if you know entirely what happens, but I've seen some articles in the paper, and as you're talking to your colleagues at AMO or Good Roads or wherever you may go, I found that a lot of municipalities have set up a very regimented pre-consultation process where people, there's a bylaw passed, people have to submit basically complete applications just to talk to the planners and the staff. And that process can be quite protracted and take a long time before an application is actually deemed complete, and then it goes into the proper process. The reasons municipalities did that was because of these penalties. If you didn't get something decided in 90 days, then all of a sudden you're refunding half your fee. And in municipalities like Southgate and others that I've worked for, certainly in many around, that the priority has always been processing development efficiently and properly and effectively, so that there's proper public and council comment and the technical reports are there. So I felt like the penalties on the fees was kind of an overstep. So in the concluding, that's a summary of Bill 185. I didn't really want to get into the weeds too far with you on it. I'm hopeful that you would consider commenting on both the bill and on the new planning statement, maybe just to nudge the province in the right direction on some of these things from your perspective. And so in the concluding comments, I guess I have 6 bullet points for thought and for discussion. The first one supports the policies in the planning statement that permit additional residential units in prime ag and rural areas in the farm cluster, if the private servicing is proper and in compliance with the MDS and so forth. And also that you can be more restrictive if council chooses to do that based on what the community says. So I think allowing the up to 3 units in rural and agricultural areas, certainly something that the community should discuss and consider. It is a way to put housing in rural areas. For a long time, we all worried that people would move out of agricultural areas in favor of bigger and bigger farms. I'm not sure that's happening, but I've certainly lived in rural areas, and I think it's a great place to live. And I'm not sure I want to be in a prime ag area necessarily, but people who do choose that, it's an alternative for providing housing that I think we should have a debate about as a community. Certainly, I support it. Flexibility in settlement boundary expansions, including rural settlements, as long as there's a comprehensive planning analysis done and an assessment of need, I certainly feel like that's appropriate to allow you to make those decisions in consultation with landowners and the county and all the agencies. And I don't think that, and if there's appeal rights on that, so be it. But most of the time, these will be worked out. As far as rural subdivision developments like Wilder Lake and maybe others that you know about in Southgate, they're allowed to infill and round out. And I'm wondering if that policy might be clarified to more clearly define that. What is infilling and rounding out a development? Is it 2 lots on a 20-lot subdivision? Is it a 20-lot subdivision beside an existing 20-lot subdivision? It's not really clear. I'm wondering if there's a way that they could clarify in provincial policy what they're going to allow as far as rural lot development, because I mentioned they took out multi-lot development out of the policy. They took that out. What do they mean then because you're going to have these questions come to you probably in the very short term about expanding rural subdivisions, estate subdivisions. I'm not supporting of eliminating the right to appeal to the OLT for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for citizens. I suppose I don't mind as much if it's for affordable housing, but just by removing that appeal, I would wonder if council might want to suggest that's not something that should, it's a fundamental change. You've always worked in the environment where there was a possibility of an appeal, and that's why you work so hard to try and resolve these things, so that doesn't happen. But I feel like in terms of fairness, that it should always remain there for citizens. Support the elimination of fee refunds on planning act applications. That's a definite strong support from my perspective. I think Alicia and others in the planning department would definitely support that as well. That we've almost got a spaghetti of language in the Planning Act now. I didn't put it in here, but it would probably be nice to streamline the Planning Act itself, because with these 4 bills in 3 years, there's a lot of new things in there to keep up with, and I don't know how staff have managed to do it. And then still support additional residential units in fully serviced areas, allowing you to determine the zoning rules for that. I didn't mention that there's a couple of little overriding statements. I believe it's in Bill 185 that the minister could set new rules on lot area and lot coverage, so that if you were relying on existing zoning rules to prohibit 3 units per lot, that the minister may override that. And I'm not thinking the minister ought to get into that kind of detail. I think you should be able to decide as a council with community impact, if there's going to be 3 units on a property, what really does that look like? And how does it work? You're already prohibited from requiring more than 1 parking space per unit, so you can only allow 1. That's what the minister has said in the legislation. And you can't restrict on the basis of the floor area of the unit. They've put that in place. And you also can't charge a development charge on it. But I think the ministry is putting a great deal of importance on these additional residential units in fully serviced areas. We get the message. We're going to have our report to you very shortly on how that would work. And I think you should be able to decide that. So those are the 6 bullet points I brought forward as potential commenting opportunities. You have until May 15th to get something to the province on the provincial planning statement. You could send along the Bill 185 things at the same time. I did want to encourage you to read the Watson and Associates summary that's, I think, on your agenda today. And also those of you who attend county council, I think there's a county report that was flowing around, but so they've looked at this in great detail as well. And so there may be things that they pick up that we missed, or we picked up that they miss. It's a lot of information to go through. I mentioned the spaghetti language, certainly on the Planning Act changes. So I would encourage you to review all those materials if you're interested in this, just to get a handle on just what's going on. It's all intended to provide more housing and to streamline things. I think some of those things that are proposed will help, others maybe not so much. That's the conclusion of my presentation. I can try and answer questions or clarify the 6 points if need be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Indeed, a lot of stuff to go through for sure. Are there any questions, comments? Monica, go ahead. And Martin next.
Thank you, Chair. Just through you to Bill. Yes, thank you again. A lot of work went into that. I share your concerns with regards to the potential reduction in public appeal rights. That really caught my eye. So just maintaining a mechanism for community input and oversight is crucial to ensure that developments meet local needs and maintain quality of life. So just with that said, I'm not sure if you're able to answer that. You may have already spoken to it, but given the changes proposed by Bill 185, what measures can the township take to ensure continued public engagement and participation in the planning process? And with your mentioning of bring it to the province? How can we express this to them, that this is something that maybe we're not really in support of that particular point?
Mhm. If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, you're still going to be required to hold the legislative public meetings under the Planning Act. So you hold your hearings for your severances already. And so in terms of engagement at the beginning of the process, that will all continue and certainly support that. And you can augment that however you see fit. There's some good things I see that are done now in municipalities that weren't done years ago, including access to all the development applications on websites and on mapping and so forth. So you can learn a lot about what's going on by just watching websites. I'm not sure, it might be something to look at in the future to get into emailing lists and so forth for people who want updates on notices that are going around. I would encourage you, if council is concerned about the appeal rights leaving, that support the 6 bullet points, and that letter can be sent and they can reevaluate whether they want to do that through Bill 185 or not. It would be an easy change just to remove that in their final reading. So I think in terms of upfront public consultation, I don't think a lot will change as a result of this. I think, and I would encourage you to keep doing the things that you're doing under the Planning Act and putting things on the website. So I'm not so worried about that, but if you're the person that does provide feedback and it's meaningful feedback in your mind and say no one listens, then you don't even have the third party sounding board of the OLT anymore in some of these situations. It doesn't always work out well if it's depending on the reasons for your appeal. So I've always found the OLT, or before that, the Ontario Municipal Board, to be very unrewarding pretty much for everyone. So, but I still feel like it's a fundamental right that should always remain there. So hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Martin?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually enjoyed reading this report, Bill, which is very big, but I love the concluding comments. And you did answer just one of my questions, that with these 6 points, which I fully support, that then we still have a time frame for this one bill in second reading, that they might actually listen to municipalities concerning this. That's good. I like the fact that it can be more restrictive. And I think your comment that we try and avoid appeal processes by working with everybody and being fair, these 6 points actually just strengthen that idea. So you said we have until May for staff and council to send something to the minister, May 15th, you said? And then the other question, it was about the Watson report. I think we should all get hard copies of that if Lindsay would do that. I know I'd like one. The other one you said about the 3 lots and the minister can come in and override. Would that have the same powers as like a ministerial zoning order? Was that what you were implying there? That's it.
Yeah, no, that's, if I may, Mayor, through you, Mayor Milne. Yeah, it's kind of basically the way we've already written the report on the additional residential units already, and we knew this was coming out, so it's one of the ones we had a lot on this agenda anyway, so it's one of the ones we delayed. But what it's saying there is, I can't remember the exact figure, but you can cover up to say 35-40% of a single family home with buildings. And so what we're saying is that 35 or 40% lot coverage should remain there, even if you want to put a second or third unit on there. What appears to be said here is, sorry, if you're using lot coverage, say, to prevent a third unit or second unit from going on a property, you're not going to be able to do that. Just like with parking, a lot of zoning bylaws say you have to provide 1.25 or 1.5 spaces per unit for an apartment. The minister has said, no, it's only 1 space per unit. So it looks like lot coverage maybe the next thing that they will say, no, you can't use that to regulate. And if you remember, the one on Golden Hagen Street, we did some drawings about what that might look like if it were 3-unit proposals. Well, if that lot coverage, I think, was 40-some%, that probably would have exceeded what your lot coverage is for most single family or detached home properties now. So what the minister's saying here is that's too bad. You're going to have to allow 30, 40, whatever percent coverage the minister feels is appropriate, because you're going to allow the 3rd unit on there. So it could be in a garage or whatever, an addition. They're not going to allow you to decide that, what your lot coverages look like in these serviced areas for the 3 units. And I think you should be able to decide that.
Thanks, Bill. Barb.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Milne, to Bill and to council. So careful. In the past, our experience, as we all know, is that the previous Bill 23 received royal assent before a consultation even closed. So by approving this today, time is of the essence to get our comments in before they, decide to change the rules without even actually looking at our consultation. Having said that, it continues to be provincial creep in dictating how we manage our growth and what is right for our community. We are actually very progressive in allowing, more lot coverage. We are working with developers to provide higher density. We are looking and encouraging developers to consider alternate types of dwellings. The province seems to want to take over our planning and dictate, but at the end of the day, we have been saying for years that we need to take a rural lens to our planning and to our communities. And a lot of what is coming down this one parking space per unit does not factor in the rural lens, in that we don't have mass transit. And we have people who are commuting to jobs, and we have young people who are living with their parents longer, and we have more snow. And one parking space per unit isn't appropriate for our community, given the lot coverage, given the snow, given the number of people in the household commuting to work, because they don't have the ability to go down to the end of the street and get on the subway. So, I still say we need to take a rural lens. So I appreciate your comments, Bill. We already permit an additional residential unit throughout our community, and including agricultural lands. But this would allow a farm family to have up to 2, and that might be a granny suite. It might be a secondary apartment with, attached to the building. It might be in an accessory structure. So I think we have already been very forward looking, and we're halfway there. I guess the only other thing that I'm really happy to see that they're encouraging not the Blue Water, but school boards to open their doors after hours and work with the community and the municipality and get those structures used by the community. So there might be opportunities that we might not have to build as big a multi-use facility if we could have access after hours to, the school gymnasium type thing. So I support the resolution. I encourage us to get that letter out as soon as possible and at least have our say in what you are suggesting. So thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Barb. Any other questions, comments? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. You're not very optimistic, are you?
Nope.
Motion has been made to go past noon. Is there a seconder? Jason, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Motions and bylaws. Thank you, Bill and Victoria. Thank you so much for your presence here today. The first bylaw is an agreement approval, the canine control and after hours bylaw services, with municipal support services. Someone care to move that, please? Joan, thank you. Second by Martin, thank you. Who is going to speak to that bylaw? Dina or Lindsay?
Yeah, it doesn't matter through you, Mayor Milne.
Sure.
It's just to follow up. This was approved at the last council meeting to have after hours bylaw on canine control with municipal support services. This is just approval of their contract. And then the following bylaws are all appointment bylaws under the new act.
Okay. Questions? Discussion? Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. That is carried.
Get a recorded vote, please.
Sure. Madam Clerk, a recorded vote has been requested.
A recorded vote has been requested on item 9.1 bylaw 2024-038 agreement approval of the canine control and after hours bylaw services with municipal support services. Mayor Milne,
Is supportive.
Deputy Mayor Dobreen,
In favor?
Councillor Rice,
No,
Councillor Ferguson is absent, Councillor Shipston,
Yes.
Councillor John, Councillor Singsors.
No.
By a vote of 4-2, that has carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to the next bylaw, it is to appoint enforcement officers from municipal support services. Someone care to move that? Barb, seconded by Joan. Thank you. Any discussion, questions? Barb?
Just to clarify through you to the clerk, my understanding is in the past, we might have had one bylaw that appointed all of these people. And the separation of this actually would be beneficial in case someone decides to move on to other opportunities. We wouldn't have to redo everyone. We can just update, repeal the one as opposed to repealing all of them and then redoing it. Is that the goal of having them all separated?
Actually, through you, Mayor Milne, they were separate for at least Bev and Phil and Hannah and Ken in the past. We're just updating it with the new legislation. But the MSS, like the Municipal Support Services one, is under one. That can be amended as their employees may change, but I think it's best to keep them all separate, as you said, for when people move on and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, discussion? Oh, Jason, go ahead.
well, I was just wondering, like, we're approving, we don't know much about this company that I don't anyway, that we're approving all these people. Like when we approve a Bev or Phil or whoever, we kind of know them. I don't know, it just seems pretty vague, all these people. We don't. Just a comment, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I understand they're all employees of municipal support services, and that's why we're approving them under this bylaw. So Madam Clerk, maybe you could clarify a little further?
Yeah, through you to Councillor Rice. We've approved their services now, so essentially we now have to do an appointment bylaw for their employees. So it's basically just a formality at this point. We've approved the services, so we can't really be without the appointment bylaws, just so they are able to be boots on the ground enforcing our bylaws.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is a bylaw to appoint enforcement officer, bylaw enforcement officer Bev Fisher. Someone care to move that, please? Barb, seconded by Joan. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Next is to appoint bylaw enforcement officer Phil Schramm. Someone move that, please. Barb and Martin, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Bylaw to enforce, to appoint bylaw enforcement officer Hannah Coombs. Move that. Someone, please. Joan, thank you. Seconder. Barb, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Final one is to appoint bylaw enforcement officer Ken Nadalin. Thank you. Someone move that, please. Barb, seconded by Martin. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We have notice, no notice of motion, actually.
Mayor
Well,
Milne.
yeah.
Yeah.
What? Is that, you want me to do that now? Okay. As many of you may know, the Durham Hospital has being proposed to be restructured, shall we say, generously. I would like to propose a motion to waive procedure to allow a notice of motion to be considered today. I think we need to get ahead of this as soon as we can. What I'd like to do is ask council support to send a letter to the minister, to our local MPP, to our local MP, other municipalities to seek support to get the board of South Grey Bruce Health Services to reverse their decision to extract all of the inpatient beds out of that hospital. And as much as I have been told that this exercise is simply to restructure or to stabilize staffing levels, removing inpatient beds effectively will close the hospital. I don't think we're fooling anybody. And there has been a great outcry from the community at the southwest of our municipality and indeed over into West Grey. It will have impacts on other surrounding hospitals that are remaining open, at least for now, i.e. Hanover, Mount Forest, Markdale. So anyway, I won't say any more at this point, other than I'll ask for a motion to waive procedure. Barb, thank you. Seconder, Monica, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. So we have a motion that Holly has got, and I will say that we had some assistance from West Grey on the crafting of this bylaw or of this motion, because they are considering the same one today. They may have already passed it. I don't know. I haven't received any notice, and it doesn't matter for our purposes because I believe it's important that we consider supporting this. I've had many discussions with our MPP and others, and it's very distressing to see that a local board can just unilaterally yank a school or a hospital out of existence without any public consultation, none. And this also has, if I could speak from a county perspective, this will have impacts on our new Rockwood Terrace. It will have impacts on our paramedic services because the response times will lengthen because they have to go further to transport patients. There's all kinds of questions about what is the plan. We've got somebody in Emerge in Durham. The Emerge apparently will stay open for now, but just during business hours, basically. What are we going to do if we got a patient in Emerge at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon that needs to be admitted? No one can answer that question for me yet. So anyway, we need to, I think we need to support this. So I would appreciate council's indulgence. Would someone care to move it, please? Thank you. Seconder, Jason, thank you. Any discussion?
Can we do,
Questions?
can we do a recorded vote for this too?
Absolutely, you can.
Sure.
Absolutely. But before we go
Sorry
there,
about that.
are there any questions?
No, I just commend you, Chair, to bring this forward. Thank you.
Well, I wish I hadn't. I wish I didn't have to,
Yeah.
but anyway, here we are. Okay. All those in favor, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, it's a recording.
want to vote it?
My apologies,
Recorded?
sorry.
No, that's
Forgot.
okay.
Madam Clerk?
No problem. So we have a recorded vote on a notice of motion regarding the Durham Hospital. Councillor Rice,
Yes.
Councillor John,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobreen,
Absolutely.
Councillor Singh Source,
Yes.
Councillor Shipston,
Definitely.
Mayor Milne,
In favor.
Councillor Ferguson is absent by a vote of 6-0. That's carried.
Thank you very much, Council. I think I appreciate the support, and I believe the community at large will support or will appreciate the support as well. I believe there's a public meeting or a meeting for the public to rally is being organized. I haven't got any final details on when that meeting is going to take place, but we look forward to that going forward. Okay.
Ryan, Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry, this just came to me after the vote. I'm not changing my vote actually, but this kind of stuff comes back down to what Deputy Mayor DeBreen says about having a rural lens. You know, this is not happening south of us. So it is a really great thing for you to mention it because it's been all over the news for the last 3 days. And it was very good of, as Monica said, Councilor Singsworth, very good of you to bring it up, and it should be looked at. As you said, a board should not have that right. So kudos.
Very good. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
So moving on to consent items, we have the regular business. There are 3 items there. Did anybody request any of those removed? Monica?
Thank you, Chair. A request to remove 11.3.19 Municipality of Brighton Rideshare Services.
Okay, that'll be under resolutions of other municipalities. So we'll get there.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So there's the 3 under regular business. Anybody wish any of those removed? Okay, someone move to support those 3. Monica, second by Joan. Thank you very much. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Correspondence for information. There are, I don't know, four of them there. Anybody wish any of those removed for further discussion? Barb?
Yeah, never mind.
Okay. Motion to support those 4 items. Monica, thank you. Seconded by Joan. All those in favor? That is carried. Now we're on to 11.3. So Monica, which one of those did you wish to remove?
Chair, it would be 11 point, sorry, I closed my screen.
Yeah, 11.3.
19, I think.
19. Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
okay.
See there? Is there another request? Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 11.3.8.
0.8. Okay. Barb, did you have one you wanted to?
Yes, sir. 11.3.3 City of Sault Ste. Marie Intimate Partner Violence Motion, and 11.3.11 the expanding the lifespan of fire apparatus by the municipality of St. Charles. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Someone care to move the balance of those consent items? Joan, thank you. Seconded by Jason. All those in favor? That is carried. Let's deal with those items now. So let's start at the top. Barb, you had 11.3.3.
Thank you, Mayor Milne, and through you to council, I would like us to support this resolution, that we receive it for information and support it as circulated by the City of Sault Ste. Marie Intimate Partner Violence Motion attached. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Southgate call on the Government of Canada to support Bill C-332 and enact the necessary amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada to include coercive control of an intimate partner, and that a copy of this resolution be circulated to a cast of many, including our MP Alex Ruff. I so move.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Joan, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. So the next one, Joan, was 11.3.8.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to pull consent item 11.3.8, resolution of other municipality of St. Charles, carbon tax. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Southgate hereby support the resolution passed by the Corporation of the City of Sarnia on January 15, 2024, and the support resolution passed by the Corporation of the Town of Clayton, Wilmin on February 14, 2024 regarding carbon tax, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Premier Doug Ford, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, or local member of parliament or local member of provincial parliament, and all other municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Is there a seconder? Barb, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. The next one was yours, Barb, at 11.3.11.
Thank you, and through you, 11.3.11, the municipality of St. Charles expanding the life of the fire apparatus. In consultation with our fire chief, Derek Malnick, I'll just read the motion. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of Southgate receive the information and support the resolutions of the Municipality of St. Charles and the Corporation of Prince County. I think I got that wrong. Attached, I'll have to look at it again, regarding extending the lifespan of fire apparatus specifically pertaining to the replacement of fire trucks due to insurance requirements. That the resolution be circulated to the appropriate parties as outlined in the attached resolutions to include our local representative, MPP Rick Byers, in place of other jurisdictional MPPs. I would move that if I can get a second or I'll further comment.
Thank you. Monica will second that. Thank you. Any discussion? Barb?
I just want to say that in consultation with our fire chief, the requirement to turn over our fire apparatus, specifically fire trucks, just because of age, not because of use, is a burden on smaller fire services. And it's all about insurance. So at 15 years, we can't use a fire truck anymore, but we haven't barely used it already. So I am asking to support this, to get this in front of the powers that be, and let us be the deciding factor as to when our fire vehicles or our fire apparatus needs to be replaced due to age or serviceability. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on, Monica, yours was 11.3.19.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just with regards to the Municipality of Brighton's resolution on rideshare services, it's just a delegation that rideshare regulations and licensing to the provincial level would result in a more streamlined and uniform governance structure, thereby reducing red tape and unnecessary administrative burdens. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Southgate hereby expresses its support for the resolution put forward by the Municipality of Brighton regarding the migration. I'm kind of repetitive there. Yeah, so just essentially, I know it's already gone through Grey County Council, which is amazing. And pretty much it's a fragmented system when it comes to rideshare. I appreciate the conversations that I've been able to have about a month ago with the CAO and with Mayor Millen, just to, regarding this and sharing this Brighton's resolution that they had. And it's a fragmented system again, so we don't have the capacity. We don't, according to CAO, and understandably, the resources to be able to take on taxi licensing. And even if we did, if someone from Southgate went over to Grey Highlands and they didn't have rideshare there implemented, they would get stuck there. So this essentially is going to help for the province to take it over. Grey County has already passed it, and I'm not sure how much I should read of all of that if you guys need me to read it, or.
I think we get the gist of it.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Well, let me see if there's a seconder for the motion.
Oh,
first.
sure.
Is there a
Sorry.
seconder? Joan, thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried.
Thank you, Mayor.
Less is more. No closed session for information. County report. Anything, Barb?
We actually, exciting news, the construction company, I hope I say it right, Milo Blarney. Blamey. Oh, it is. It's not an. There we go. I need glasses. They have been the successful bidder, and we have awarded the tender. The county has awarded the tender for the new Rockwood Terrace long-term care redevelopment. So we're excited and anticipate completion early in 2027. There's still a lot to work to be done, but on the county website under redevelopment, there's drone footage of how they have spent time preparing the site. It's quite neat to watch. And to the previous notice of motion that we just passed regarding Durham Hospital, finding out about the Durham Hospital on the same day that we're awarding the tender for the Rockwood redevelopment was like, it has so much effect on everything, long-term care, as you said. So really excited about that. Yeah, and we approved a Beaver Valley Sustainability Tourism Strategy Memorandum of Understanding with the Town of Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands Regional Tourism 7, and that will roll out shortly. So looking forward to more news on that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions on the county stuff? Nope. Good. Members' privilege. Good news and celebrations. Monica.
Thank you, Mayor. We normally have like our our council meetings on Wednesday, which would have marked May 1st. But because it's a one day before, I just want to take a moment to celebrate the beginning of Asian Heritage Month. As someone of South Asian descent, I cherish this time of recognition and celebration. My husband, who's of European descent, he joins in with the celebration and embracing the cultural heritage. And he obviously likes it because he's with me. So anyhow, but together we invite everyone from all backgrounds to join in appreciating the diverse and vibrant contributions of Asian Canadians. And I wish everyone an inspiring and enlightening Asian Heritage Month. With that being said, also the Good Roads Conference, we just were all attended it. Jim and his staff, Jim Ellis and his staff, Jim Ferguson, Councillor Jim Ferguson and Mayor Millen. We all attended different delegations, and I learned a lot about pavement, which Mayor Millen said I would learn about, which you were right. So that was a lot of fun. I'm really happy that we have our amazing staff that we do that take that stuff over. So it was a really good conference. And as a result, there was a great result from the delegation that I was in attendance with Honorable MPP Rick Byers, Deputy Mayor Warren Dickert, Mayor Scott Mackey, and just special thanks to Minister of Transportation, Pravmeet Sakaria, that they were able to successfully secure over 1 million in gas tax funding to enhance our local public transit. So this is just kind of for the SMART committee and all of the work. And I'm sure that we are going to continue as committee members and council members to have these delegations that are very crucial and key to attend. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Monica. Congratulations on the successful delegation. Any others? Okay. Moving on. We have a closed meeting. Sorry. Okay, go ahead, please.
Through you, I did want to acknowledge that Junction Community Initiatives held their second annual International Women's Day on Saturday at the Egremont Optimist Hall. It was packed. It was so exciting to see and touching to see the number of individuals being recognized by their peers in the community for their hard work and volunteerism. And, not one of them that were there did it for the accolades. They were so surprised, some declining to come initially because they don't feel they feel there's others that are so much more deserving. But when at the end of the day, they were there, they enjoyed it, and it's just a really great opportunity to recognize the many people in our community, women and others, that do so much, that bring so much to our community and make it a home as opposed to just, pavement and pipes in the ground. So thank you. And thank you, Councillor Joan, for your role in that, being the founder of JCI.
Excellent. Thank you. And it was a tremendous evening. I don't think I've ever seen the Optimist Hall decorated as nicely as it was that night. Somebody put a lot of pile of work into it. So congratulations. Okay, we have a closed meeting. I have a motion here. Be it resolved that council proceed into closed session at 12:11 in order to address matters relating to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, specifically a tribunal matter, and that all those required remain in attendance. Would someone care to move that, please? Barb, seconded by Monica. Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we shall proceed into closed session. Coming out of closed session, I can declare that we only discussed those items which we listed on the in-camera agenda. Motion to confirm the bylaw. Yes, Barb and Jason. Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. I have one more motion. Monica, second for adjournment. Martin, all those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank